My guest at this time is one of the hosts for 94.3, the Shark. It is Brian Orlando, and maybe during this interview, maybe in a separate interview, we will be joined by Wheatus's Brandon B. Brown. It's Brian Orlando. Brian, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Appreciate it, brother. See, I am not a big rock star, which means that I could be on time.
Yeah. Brandon, it'd be, that's the kind of interesting thing about this. I would normally wait till he's here, but I kind of like the idea of just him doing a run-in, considering this is a wrestling interview.
Have you seen any of his wrestling stuff, his feud with MJF and all of that?
I did a little tertiary looking around here, getting myself on the hook. Why, you want to talk about it real quick to tease everybody about what we could be talking about here later on?
I think it's hilarious. I mean, I have this friend that I've known for a while. I've been a diehard wrestling fan my whole life. He has not been. And then here he is in the ring administering a DDT on the most dastardly villain, from Long Island. It was hysterical to see.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's not just that. I mean, Wheatus has played Nate Webb to the ring over at GCW. So I'm not really surprised, Brian, because Wheatus and Teenage Dirtbag was like such a part of everybody's like 90s, late or early 2000s like vibe. And of course, when you think about that era, you think about pro wrestling, and it doesn't shock me to see these two things have come together,
I sent you the video of Ashley Massaro teaching Brendan how to do the DDT on the beach at Lake Ronkonkoma, right?
You did, yes. Yeah.
It's one of my fondest memories ever, which is how we're going to tie all this together. But it was amazing to me that show went off the way it did, that whole Joey Janela thing, because it gave hope to alternatives to wrestling. I mean, I'm a big WWE fan, but to see all of this other type of wrestling out there, it was cool to see. It was successful.
Yeah, man. I mean, GCW does good work. And, that's the thing about it is you just got to be able to play along and have a good time. And that's like what Brandon and Wheatus have been doing. So I think it's awesome, man. Let's talk about Ashley Massaro here, because that's really what brought us together here today. And when Brandon comes in, if he comes in, we can get his take as well. But of course, the Choose Song video was released. I believe it was just this past week. I don't think it's been more than a week old.
Last Saturday.
Yeah, last Saturday. So a little over a week old here. Talk to me about this music video, your participation, what you all were trying to accomplish with the Choose Song video first.
So the song was written, ironically enough, today's Chris Cornell's birthday. The song was written after Chris Cornell passed away.
Wow.
And I was just really taken aback by the fact that somebody whose music saved my life so many times couldn't find the strength to save his own. And the lyrics to the song were my working my way through those feelings. And then I sat on them for a while. I had known Ashley for quite some time, and I had been trying to get her involved with 94.3 The Shark for quite some time, but we were never able to work out the details. Like, she always had something going on. I couldn't get my boss to sit down with an interview. And then around Christmas of 2017, she helped me out with the charity broadcast I was doing for Angela's House, which helps medically fragile children. And she was great. And she did a live broadcast, and the phone started to ring. It's like, was that really Ashley? I'm like, yeah. So that got the boss's gears turning about bringing her on to become a jock for our station.
Okay.
Fast forward a year, I show Brendan B. Brown the song that I wrote for Chris Cornell. We sat in his attic in Northport, Long Island, for about 7 hours. He fleshed out the demo.
Wow.
We sent it to a couple of friends, Vinny Dombrowski from Sponge and Kevin Martin from Candlebox.
Right.
And throughout the course of the year, we made the song. Now, during this time, Ashley Massaro became a jock for us at 94.3 The Shark. And it was the funniest thing to see this woman who stood in front of 15,000 people every night be nervous to talk on a microphone.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
She took to it pretty fast. I would stop in on Saturdays. She was on every other Saturday at first. I would stop on just to see how she was doing, give her some tips. She always asked, what can I do to get better? The big fear was that this big TV star came into a local radio station and she would want to take over. And it was the furthest thing from that. All she wanted to do was learn. So Brendan started getting involved with GCW wrestling and the Joey Janela stuff. And I don't know how it came up, but I said, hey, I have this song. Would you check it out? And I believe it was Ashley that said, are you going to do a music video? And I never thought about it.
Hmm.
And then we came up with the concept of the GoPros and the carpool karaoke. And in casual conversation, I asked her if she wanted to be a part of it. And she couldn't have been more thrilled that I asked.
That's awesome. And what was it like putting the video together and working with her? I mean, was she as adamant about this subject of raising suicide prevention awareness as it seemed like the whole team was in that moment?
So this is going back a couple of years. What I remember specifically about what she said, and like the only thing that I feel like I can quote from that conversation at the studio, she said, I've had my own struggles with this. I would love to help.
Yeah. That's really that's tough to hear. I mean, especially considering, knowing what happened with Ashley. I mean, what was your knowing the context of this, I mean, what was your reaction to finding out the news of Ashley's passing? I mean, it just seems very
It took me
surreal.
a long time. It was surreal. I knew it happened immediately. It wasn't like I couldn't fully process the news, but I couldn't fully process the sheer irony of everything.
Yeah.
We were just a couple of weeks away from releasing the video, and I had spoken to her that day. You can go back and look for signs and things like that, but they really weren't there.
Yeah.
Just a couple of weeks before I showed her a rough copy of the video, we had met at a car dealership so she can get her daughter a car.
Okay.
And I had been going through a divorce, and Ashley was truly one of my closest allies during it. Like, every time I told anybody I was getting divorced, it was, what happened? What did you do? When I told Ashley, it was, how can I help? Are you okay? And no judgment. And she was friends with my ex-wife too, but there was no judgment. And after we went and picked out cars, we sat and we talked for a while. And I just remember her being so honest and so accepting to everything that I told her about my divorce. And then we sat and we watched the video, and from what I remember, she thought it was fantastic.
That's awesome, Brian. And you've got this video, and then considering the circumstances, I mean, there had to be hesitation on your part about getting this video out. What did it do to what was it like trying to figure out how to release this film after Ashley's passing, I guess, for you?
I immediately scrapped it. Like, the whole thing just felt disgusting. I wanted nothing to do with it. I wasn't even thinking at that moment about how other people would react to it. It just seemed completely wrong. There was nothing about this thing that I wanted to touch.
Yeah.
You have a suicide prevention video, you have one of your closest friends in it, and here's the star of the video, and she takes her life, and it was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. I remember Brendan was in Europe, and he found out through Twitter about Ashley's passing. So I wound up missing a good portion of my show because we were on the phone. It was 6 o'clock in the morning by me, maybe noon by him. Then Vinny had texted me. And I don't think anybody talked to me about the video for a couple of weeks. I think it was just known, went without saying that we weren't going to put it out. Kevin Martin from Candlebox was the first, maybe about a month later, when I called him just to talk. And he brought up a good point. He said, I think we need to release it because this is going to show people that depression can affect anybody at any time. And it was a really good point, but I still wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
I think maybe I watched the video 3 times over the course of that year. And then COVID-19 happened, and we put together a telethon for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, who were going to be the beneficiaries of the song once we released it.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of the telethon was that everybody was focusing on the nurses and the doctors and all the heroes, but what about the people who were sitting home so they weren't infecting people, what about them? They're heroes too, and they're sitting in silence, and they don't have anybody to talk to. So that telethon was all about reaching out to them and showing them that all of us are sitting at home. And Brendan and Vinny and Kevin were a part of it, and we had Zach from the Nixons and the Guru Dolls, and Noah Cyrus. It was a really cool thing.
Yeah, man. And what led to you ultimately deciding that you wanted to have this out then? Was it just the feel around that and the knowing that you were doing good?
That telethon was a big part, because the idea of the song is, with music, you're never alone. There's
Right.
a brighter note tomorrow. Don't choose the end, choose song.
Beautiful.
And once that telethon happened, Vinny had reached out to me maybe 2 weeks later, and he said, "Hey, cuz, you know, the work with the telethon was so good. Would you be into releasing the video?" And I said, "Well, Vin, it's been this long. Why now?" And he went through his, not argument, his case. The suicide hotline traffic in Michigan was up 1,000%. People are really unraveling because there's nowhere to go right now. There were no gyms, there were no restaurants, and music was the only thing we had. And he goes, I think now more than ever, he goes, I watched the video the other day. He goes, I think the message is still right. So we agreed that the first thing we needed to do was talk to the Massaro family. I said, if they aren't into this, then we can't do it. And he agreed 100%.
Yeah. Right.
So Ashley's daughter works for us. There hasn't been any work because there's no promotions, but she's a great kid, Alexa. So I had gone over there for lunch, and in true Italian household fashion, it wasn't a lunch, it was a feast.
Sure.
2 hours later, after we were done eating, we talked about the video. We talked about why Ashley wanted to do it. And Ashley's mom said, look, Brian, this really isn't my decision. Ashley wanted to do this. She's in the video for a reason. This is what my daughter wanted. These were her wishes. But then we watched it. Everybody had a positive reaction to it. Vinny called on the phone and he explained himself, and he says, look, there's no pressure. If you guys don't want to do this, we won't talk about it again. But they agreed. So we waited a couple of weeks, tried to figure out the right way to do it, and then finally just said, screw it and put it out.
Yeah, man, it's really powerful. And I mean, what a story behind it too. I mean, what's the reaction been like from fans and listeners since seeing and hearing the video?
So I think so far, with very little promotion, we have about 14,000 views.
Yeah.
And on YouTube, you can vote thumbs up or thumbs down. And we have 140 thumbs up and only 1 thumbs down, which on the internet is impossible.
Right.
The fact that you only have 1 negative reaction, I would say, is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's great. I mean, it is, it's very, very sad and unfortunate what happened with Ashley, obviously. But it is, I think it is really powerful that you guys did put it out and put a face to it and raise that kind of awareness, because I hadn't even thought about it until we were talking right now about how much more serious the suicide awareness issue is now with people not having places to go at the moment. I think it's really awesome. Do you guys have any plans to do anything else to raise awareness? Are there next steps for you all with this project or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I work with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention fairly often. We have to figure out how we're going to do the walk this year, because that has to be socially distant. But the video came out just hopefully to help people. We're going to release the song in a couple of weeks to all the streaming services and things like that.
Awesome.
And as we move forward, there were talks about doing some benefit concerts, and maybe now with live streaming being so popular due to COVID,
yeah,
maybe they could be small arenas and we can just Facebook Live it and, put out some sort of stream key where you could donate, just have a donation link. I think eventually I'd like to work with more artists and do more of these.
Sure.
I'm not a songwriter. I'm a local DJ. I just happen to get really lucky, befriend some really cool guys. And, I think it's me and Rick D's with Disco Duck. I think we're the only 2 DJs that that wrote songs out there. So I haven't really given it much thought because this isn't really my field, but I do want to use it to
Yeah.
promote more awareness for mental health.
I think it's great, man. And now's the time for it. I think it's just wonderful what you're doing, Brian. And, just kind of want to, to kind of get your thoughts here to at the end, what is your wrestling fandom like for you? How familiar were you with Ashley's like in-ring work? Were you a fan of hers? Like what was the relationship like there for you in pro wrestling?
Well, I knew Ashley's work because I was still a big wrestling fan. But when she rose to prominence, I wasn't as big into it. Like, I don't know if you could see it, but the Ultimate Warrior is tattooed on my arm.
Whoa, that is intense. That is a big Ultimate Warrior tattoo. For those that are listening just in audio form, that's impressive. Okay.
So growing up, wrestling was as cathartic for me as music. Like, that was just another outlet that saved my life. I was a fat kid. I was bullied. I didn't have the easiest childhood, but every 4 o'clock on ESPN, the Legends of World Class Championship Wrestling was on, and that hour was my escape. The Von Erich brothers were my all-time heroes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And then I see the Ultimate Warrior, and he's this larger-than-life comic book character come to life. Brutus the Barber Beefcake and Rowdy Roddy Piper. Those were my all-time favorites.
Wow, Beefcake in a top 3. That's very rare that he gets a top 3 status like that. Anyway, go ahead.
Wrestling wasn't as judgy back then. It was more about the characters. Looking back on it, yeah, those matches were atrocious. But it was fun for a 10-year-old,
Hey, man, my favorite wrestler growing up was Duke the Dumpster Droese, who as an adult, I've come to appreciate his in-ring work a lot. As a kid, I just liked the persona. But now as an adult, I'm like, what an agile big man Droese was. So, anyway.
Well, so I was still into it because I was working for radio stations in New Jersey where I was living at the time. So I knew Ashley's work. I knew obviously it was a big deal when she made the cover of Playboy because she was a Long Island girl. She grew up only a couple of towns over from me.
Right.
And then I started working with this promoter of a wrestling convention about 10 years ago. And he asked me to do a couple of interviews with the wrestlers to promote the convention in Queens, the big event.
Oh, okay.
One of them was Ashley. And we had the 20-minute allotted time, but her being a Long Island girl and I started to talk about Smithtown and talk about mutual friends, and we were BSing a little bit, and we were just 2 Long Islanders talking, so we hit it off. And when I got to the event and introduced myself, we sat and talked for a while. We just became friendly and stayed friendly.
Dude, that's awesome, man. And so you keeping up now still? Are you still a wrestling fan, or have you fallen back out?
No, I watch it. The less I say about last night, probably the better.
I was gonna say, man, eye for an eye, right? What a payoff, I
remember when Wrestling Angles used to pique your curiosity with that, because you knew they weren't really gonna rip your eye out, so you would watch and go, okay, so what are they really gonna do? But no, they actually ripped his eye out.
Well, did they? I feel like he more pushed it in. Like, I don't know that it came out. It looked like he was pushing it into me, but a debate for another day. But, anyway, Brian, you're great. I want to thank you so much for the time, man, and opening up about your relationship with Ashley and the meaning behind Choose Song. I'd love to have you back another time. We don't have to talk about as heavy a subject. We can just, shoot the bullshit, so to say, about pro wrestling another time. And yeah, man, Brenda didn't run in. I'll get him later, I guess. We can set this up for a separate interview. But
he just called me, so something must have happened.
Okay, well, later this week we'll talk. Well, I would hopefully catch up with Brenda. I'd love his perspective too, and to talk about all the stuff that Wheatus has done with Janela and GCW. But Brian, you're great, man, and like genuinely, like as somebody, and I'm sure everyone's been affected by this issue at some point in their life. I think it's just really great what you're doing. I think I encourage you to keep with the path that you guys are on and keep fighting the good fight, man. It helps a lot of people. It saves a lot of lives. I think you guys did absolutely the right thing putting this video out. So
I appreciate it. And the most important thing is thank you for giving me an outlet to talk about my friend.
Absolutely, Brian. And just for you, is there anything you want to plug, promote, put over here, tell people where to find you, that kind of thing?
Well, if you want to watch the song, you just go to YouTube. It's Choose Song official video. And there's a link in the details where you can donate to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention if you want. You can even click on the link to get more information as well. You know, there's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and then there are different suicide prevention groups like AFSP that provide different types of information. Just going on the website and reading about signs to look for could help save somebody's life, because you never know who's struggling.